Today's lecture is a follow-up from yesterday. Yesterday we covered gradients and blends. We're going to learn a relatively new tool today, the gradient mesh tool. One tool, I will show you the principles of using it, and unfortunately there is no longer an exercise in the book that teaches you how to use it. So I'll show you how to use it, and also show you some gotchas, some things that you need to look out for. So I'm going to start by creating two shapes, just a simple square and a circle. And I'll fill them with color. You don't necessarily have to do this, but I'm going to just show you how the thing works. So I have a solid fill, I have a black stroke, regular shape. Now I'm ready to convert this to, it's called gradient mesh, which allows me to apply multiple colors to an individual shape. That's fundamentally what it allows you to do. There's two ways that you can convert a shape to a gradient mesh. The first one is to select the object and then go up to the object window and select Create Gradient Mesh. And when you do, it asks how many rows, how many columns you want. Do you want a flat appearance, or to center, or to edge? You know, if you're wondering what any of that means, just select Preview. You'll notice that it's added a grid. And within this grid, you'll see various points of intersection, they're anchor points. It's at each of these anchor points that you are now able to apply different colors. Okay. So this is the default setting. I'll leave this one alone. I'll select this one, but I'm going to do it a different way. Now what I can do is I can use this tool, which is our gradient mesh tool. It's a rectangle with a little grid on it. And I'm just going to click. Boom. And wherever I click, you'll see it's almost as if there is a wire mesh that crosses. And I click again, and there's another one. But no color change, because this is now more of a manual rather than an automatic mode. But with the direct selection tool, just as you would select an anchor point on a path, you select the point of intersection. And as you do, and you'll see it highlighted, then select a color. And it adds a little spot of color wherever you want. Okay? If I select click here, and I want a little bit of orange, it applies the orange. And you can click and click and click and click and have as many points of intersection as you want. I can also come back here and I can select this one. By default, it applied white. So I can come back and you can start to apply other colors. You can see it's like little drop. If you've ever worked with watercolor, this little droplets of pigment that you would add, or maybe an airbrush tool. It's very similar to both. Now these colors can be, that you apply in here, can be manipulated in a variety of ways. First, you'll notice that there are tangent handles that appear, and they are sticking out here. It's hard to see them because they're in alignment with the grid itself. But with the direct selection tool, watch what happens when I click and I drag and I pull on it. Notice if I deselect, notice it's a little bit harder on that edge. It's as if, again, if you work with watercolor and you want to manipulate how the pigments are going to dry, you can actually take a straw and you can blow on it and it will push the pigments in the water in a particular direction. It's almost the same principle. Or loading up with an airbrush or something in a particular direction so that it pushes the pigments in a particular way. We can also take, and as I said, if I were to, let's go ahead and apply another color here, something lighter so we can see. need something pink or something. Then if I take, now whoops, wrong one, select here. There, we go. See when I pull on the tangent handle and how it pushes that pigment in that direction? So now you can manipulate it a little bit. It can be, you can use it in its simplest form, or you can really get intricate with it. You can get really, really intricate with the use of this. You also have the option, let's come back over here again. If I select an anchor point and I select the gradient mesh tool, and I hold down on the control key or the command key, now when I slide it, notice that the horizontal wire stays static, but the vertical wire is the only one that's being manipulated. So instead of pulling them both, I'm just pulling on one in one direction. Does that make sense? You also have the option too, depending on what kind of gradient you want to create, of eliminating vertical or horizontal lines. Because typically, if I were to select, I can use the pen tool. There's a couple ways that you can do this. And I can select the pen tool that removes an anchor point. And when I remove it, watch what happens. When I click, whoops, I can't do it that way. Sorry, I misspoke. Come on. You have to select the direct selection tool, select the point that you want. There you go, it's highlighted. And hit the, up here. Why are you working with? I just want to remove a point. Did I select the right one? Want to remove the one point. Okay, let me do it this way. I'm going to remove an entire line, and you have to have the there we go. Okay, so I have the gradient mesh tool selected. Hold down the option key, and I click. Notice it's selected. Remove both. Remove the vertical line and the horizontal line associated with it. However, if I hold, that was by clicking on the anchor point. If I have the gradient mesh tool selected, I hold down the option key and I click on the line, it just removes the line. Let me undo that and do it again. Let's come back over here. So, the gradient mesh tool selected. After I've selected an anchor point, if I wish to remove the vertical and the horizontal in both, select the gradient mesh tool, move over the anchor point and hold down the option key. Click, and notice the vertical and the horizontal both are gone. On the other hand, if I only wish to remove one of the lines, not both, the vertical or the horizontal, move over the line with the gradient mesh tool selected, hold down the option key, and click on the line itself. It only removes the line. Should. Did it? No. Remove this one too, huh? Yes. Okay, let's go back again. Select an anchor point, move over, down. Oh, it's going to have to be, whoops. Just remove the horizontal. Now, so that's fundamentally how that thing works. Gotchas. That you can come back with your, let's go ahead and again select a couple of anchor points, and you can hold down the shift key and select multiple anchor points. Select the gradient mesh tool, hold down the option key, and click on them and remove them all. Now you may think that this goes back to a regular shape, doesn't it? It doesn't. It remains a gradient mesh object. What do I mean by that? Let's go to our swatches, and let me try to put a traditional, regular gradient on here. It won't do it. Try to put a pattern in, it won't do it. So even though you don't have any of the mesh, it's still, once you convert it to a gradient mesh, it sees it as a gradient mesh. So what's the workaround? Similar to what I showed you yesterday with regard to type. And if you wish to apply a gradient to type, I said make a copy of it first before you convert to outlines. Similarly, because it doesn't have to be a simple circle, simple square, it can be any shape you want to convert to a gradient mesh, any kind of shape you want. But if it's taken you time with the pen tool to create that path, you may not want to spend the time to generate that shape again. So make a copy of it, set it aside, and then convert the copy of it to a gradient mesh. In the event that you decide to change your mind and just put a simple gradient in it, or a simple fill, or a pattern, or something like that, then you'll have a backup, so you don't have to recreate it. So the only workaround is to come back with this shape, is to come back and begin to add points again. And then with them selected, then you can come back to your colors and start to apply little spots of color. Now, when does the gradient mesh not work that well? Both of these shapes that I selected were intentional. From a design point of view, they would be considered closed shapes. Anybody had graphic design? Meaning learning how to design logos and things like that to be designed? Okay. Think of your fist as a closed shape. It's like a circle, it's self-contained. An open shape would be like your hand open with the fingers outstretched. Okay? Your fingers point the viewer's, push the viewer's eye in this direction, kind of like a star shape. So watch what happens. Right now we have a closed shape. The gradient mesh tool works really well. For open shapes, it doesn't work that well. What would be an example of an open shape? In the default tools that we have here, the star tool is a perfect one. So now if I'm thinking to myself, you know what, I want to convert this shape to a gradient mesh, and I'm thinking it's going to make a nice perfect vertical and horizontal grid, it's not going to do that. What it does for the object, when I select to create gradient mesh, is that it follows the contour of the shape. And you'll notice that when you deselect, the interior of the shape with the mesh may not follow the contour the way you like. So this is the workaround that I recommend you do, is to come back here with the direct selection tool, selecting each of these anchor points and moving them about and trying to make the fill work the way you want would just take you forever. There's a better approach, I think, if you want to fill in here. And it's something we've learned already. It's to use, let's bring up layers. And it's to use, whoops, that's not layers. It's to create a clipping mask. To use the mesh in a closed shape. It could be a square or it could be a circle. That would be a good example of one. And then what we're going to do, I'll just use this one as an example. I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to undo it so it's a regular shape. Put the shape on top. Is this still a gradient? No. Okay. Now I select both. And now I create a clipping mask. And now it's masked inside here. Now I can take my circle, okay, so I can use the direct selection tool, or the group selection tool rather. Select the circle. I can use my free transform tool. and increase the size of it so it fills the entire shape. Let's move this in the center. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Let's go back. Oh, come on. Okay, so that's here. How are you doing this thing? I'm having a good morning. There we go. Why they're both not being selected, I do not know. Let me come back in here and enlarge it one more time. Because it should behave as a group. So now I can come back in with my direct selection tool and I can select any of these anchor points and move it about, and notice how it follows a nice rigid grid within the star shape. Does that make sense? Sort of? Maybe until you do it. Well, a really good example of an illustration we have that's used, that you are free to look at and to analyze, is this. Notice all the shapes. They're really pretty much closed shapes. You know, there's little blips in here, but they're pretty much self-contained. They're not spiky, too spiky like a star would be. Same with the leaf. Same with the stem. It's just a rectangle. But when you look at it and you zoom in, you can see that this is broken down pretty intricate in a pretty complex grid. And that if you were to select each of these anchor points with the direct selection tool, you can see what colors have been applied to each to create that soft and intricate transition from one color, one tone to another. Okay? So it can be, and if you want it to be precise, this can really take a while. Not so much in creating the shapes, but creating the grid and manipulating the grid and applying colors to each of those anchor points to create this nice smooth transition to get a stylized realism, but realistic look. But as you can see, I think the end result can be rather stunning. This is more of a brush look. Another recommendation that I make too is be able to see a preview while you're working, because notice that when you look at each of these shapes, you can't see the mesh. But if I go to view and I make sure that Smart Guides is checked, then when I roll over the shape, I can, without selecting the shape, I can see the grid, and I can click on a particular anchor point that maybe I want to apply color to. Does that make sense? Add a little spot of color there. So think about it. When you use gradient meshes, you want to use closed shapes. If you want to apply it to an intricate kind of open shape, then use that open shape as a clipping mask, but still apply it to either a rectangle or circle. To be able to view the grid without selecting the shape, have go under view and have Smart Guides turned on so that when the mouse rolls over, you can see the complex or the intricate grid that you've established here. Any questions about this? It just takes practice using it. I can't. The sample that they used to have in the book was very simple. It was not as intricate as this. It was, they gave you the shapes of a butterfly, and they said, okay, here's an intricate, a little grid that you're going to create, and click here and here, and you add little spot colors to create a nice little airbrush or watercolor-like look of a butterfly. So that would be a simple approach. An even more complex use of it would be if you go to my website. And this really blows me away today. So this student was able to do this. Slow connection. Artwork. So slow. Car. Extremely intricate use of the gradient mesh tool. To think of each of these as separate shapes, and then to be able to add and control the gradients in a very precise way, convert each of those shapes to gradient mesh. But it's pretty nice. Pretty nice illustration of the car. Well, I'm amazed at how well he was able to do the renders. Extremely intricate. They're not photographs. He's very, very. So, no, two really good examples of what the gradient mesh can be used for. Now think about it. I don't know that I would have the patience for this in the tool. It's working for give it to somebody else. It's not, you know, everybody has different personality when it comes to working on stuff. Okay, so that's a good follow-up to what we did yesterday. So those are the principal ways that you can add color and control color within the shapes, aside from just a solid fill. If you want gradients or you want to create blends, or within a contained shape, add multiple colors, this is the only way you can do it. Now, but having said that, it does bring to mind something that I showed you yesterday, is that what if I wanted to, let's go back here, let me just, one more little thing. Just one more little thing here. Pen tool. And I'm going to go ahead and stroke. Similar to what I did yesterday. And I need to increase the thickness. So the window, select stroke, so that's there. Oh, I know why. Okay. Can you delete all this? It's all contained under the, I really messed up. It was contained in that mask, so no matter what I applied, you know what the attributes of that shape weren't shown. So So let me go back to the pen tool. That's what it is. Okay. Let's make copies of it. Select different colors for each of these. Select the blend tool. Blend between. Okay. What views? Not having very good luck. Just one of those days. Let's try again. Look in the center. Huh. Had not a clue what things are not working. So, we need to start over again. Something else going on here? Let me see. No? Okay, so why is this? Oh, because I have a fill. That's why. Okay. That's why it wasn't on here. Thought I had changed it so there was no fill. Now I select the blend tool. Something you're supposed to be careful of. There's no fill when you're doing this. Now I can create whatever shape I want on top. Let's go ahead and use the star tool. And select them both. And then come back to layers and create clipping units. Now that is in here. Right. So you could also use the blend tool to create an intricate blend of colors from one to another. And then use any shape you want as a clipping mask to mask anything outside of it. So that would be another way of doing that. Maybe not the best example. You get the idea. Because you couldn't do this with a radial gradient, you couldn't do this with a linear gradient. So how are you going to know? I could go ahead and I could turn this into, put a gradient mesh back there and do that, or I can use the blend tool and then use that shape as a clipping mask to create that look.
Can you use the gradient mesh tool on a stroke? Or you have to...
No, it has to be shaped.
Okay. So if you had a thick stroke, you can go in and...
If you had a thick stroke, you could say outline stroke. Now that is a shape, and then you could apply it, turn that into a gradient mesh. Yeah, without a doubt.
Would you be able to do like to get that effect with the Pathfinder tools too, or?
Maybe. I don't want to say no. I'd have to see it in a specific instance, and then we could say, yeah, that might be doable. But remember, when we were doing gradient fills, it could only be radial or linear gradients. So if you want something that's different, then yesterday we did the blend tool. Well, there is another way. There's the gradient mesh tool, so that they don't have to follow the gradient doesn't have to follow those paths. Okay, that's all I wanted to add today. And yesterday's lecture is already up on the website.